All right, guys. So I'm going to go through a little bit of my process on, how I make these small pieces of jewelry. This is not going to be a gold one. This will be silver, but kind of going through a little bit of the process. So you start off with a type of wax resin that can go through and be it's castable. It is something where you go through and you can print a sprue tree, and then you can actually cast this entire tree. So I have done this on several different occasions. The ones I'm working with today, I oversized by 5%. So the measurements for these things are pretty oversized. So we might have to change up the stones and things, but this was originally on a sprue tree. See how it's got different cut marks and everything. You have to cut these down. So definitely have them in different stages, not off the sprue tree. And then these were already clipped. So when you clip them, there are items that are got score marks and cut marks, and these are really just rough. Okay, so whatever stone you decide to go through and do, you connect your chains here to the loops, and then the stone size you can go through and do several different. But for example, these are really cheap CZs, and this is a 5 mil. I designed this for a 5 mil, and it is something that's going to take a little extra work. I don't know if you can see this very well, but it is very deep in there, and the crevice is just slightly oversized. So it'll take a little bit more work on the back end, but I am very much happy with those results. So you can do diamond, you can do moissanite, you can do topaz, you can do mystic green topaz, whatever stone that you're deciding, it would definitely go through. This is built for a round cut, and then it is one of those floating. It really doesn't turn on you because it's got the weight right at the tip, at the lowest point, and then it's attached to the chain by the ears here. So really great piece. I designed this one myself. So let's get to it. So I have to start off with cleaning up this piece. And filing it down, getting it roughly cut in. So some of the things that I'll go through and use, I have sanding sticks of every kind, and for quick work, you go through and use files as well. Okay, now this is a little mandrel. It's a jewelry mandrel where I could go through and grab a hold of the ears, or I could go through and grab the whole piece so that I can work one edge. It wedges in here, but you got to be careful because depending, it can squeeze pretty hard and bend your pieces. So I got that in there, and then I will just start with my filing. Now while you're going through and going on this, it's really important to see what's getting shiny and what's staying that matte finish from the cast. So you can see here there's shiny ports, but then there's one spot in the middle that still hasn't been touched yet. You don't want to go too far because this is really removing quite a bit of material. But you want to get down to where it's a uniform shape. We're getting very close now. Oop, there it is. Okay, Now, as you can see, there's that egg shape. It's not quite round, and we want to go through and get this cleaned up. So a lot of times I'll just go fairly slow, using my fingers really tightly like that, trying to go through and round that out really well. There's quite a bit of work here just for these to turn out the way that you want as a custom clean piece. You know, this is not something that is cheap considering how much work goes into them, and you want to make sure that this is really a special piece. Now there's also something that's really important to note is, you know, these are straight out of the cast. It has not been annealed after the casting, and so it is slightly tempered just based off of the way that it did come out of the mold. So you actually have to quench it at a certain temperature. So annealing is going through and taking the metal, heating it up and letting it naturally cool so that it's actually softer. Just like with any type of steel or metal, you can go through and temper it or harden it by quenching. It's getting it hot and then rapidly cooling it. It actually takes those molecules and pushes them faster and farther together, making a much harder bond. So, you know, if you guys ever watched Forged in Fire, you know, there's definitely a bit of trickery when it comes to the heat. So that is going through and trying to make a blade strong and hard. That would be hardening it. Annealing is the opposite. You heat it up and then you let it naturally cool down. While you're hammering on stuff, it work hardens. So it's a very important process when you're working with this. I've got so much material, I might have to do that here. Heat it up and then let it naturally cool down. And then it also depends on what metal that you're using, you know, because gold acts differently than argentinum or silver. They have very different properties and ways to heat or cool, and then different alloys, because if you got yellow gold versus white gold or things of that nature, it's definitely going to be very different when you work through it. Okay, so we're starting to look pretty good here. Alright, we've got a decent shape. You know, once you get to this point, files are taking a little bit too much debris off, so then we can start switching up to the sanding sticks. These are pretty good because you get pretty deep down into whatever crevices you're looking for. These are good for larger surface areas and making sure things are flat. So I'm just going to start working away at it. So these have got pretty decent grits, and you can get them in every different type, but you very much want to go through and pay attention to what it is that you're removing. Every different grit will go through and get you to a different shine, and we're wanting this to be mirror-like. This is definitely one where you want it as clean and quick as possible, because you want it shiny. We'll also go through, and once we get to a certain point, we'll tumble, really going through and bringing out that nice shine. It's a process, you know. Tumbling gives a really nice shine. And when you're using a harder material, it actually does what's called burnishing. So burnishing is where it's actually taking the cuts and grooves in the metal. If you're looking at the metal, it's got little cuts and grooves, valleys and mountains. So it kind of looks like this if you've got it under a microscope. And the harder material actually goes through and bends and pushes those mountains and valleys together. rather than removing material, which is what abrasives do, like this, burnishing with steel shot and things like that, it actually goes through and smooths those crevices out. It's just rubbing and pushing them together. So it's actually a very, very cool part of how these metals react, especially with what kind of finishes you're trying to go through and get out there. So you can also go through and keep looking at your circles, see what it looks like. Does it look like a semicircle? And of course, we've only done one side here. We're only cleaning up this back edge. We've got a lot of work to do on the other side as well, just to get it close. And then you can switch over to the abrasive wheels, which is really important as well. That makes really quick work. They are expensive, but it's something where jewelers love going through and getting these nice tools because they make things so much easier. Now the abrasive wheels, again, it's not burnishing or anything like that. It's still going through, and whatever grit that you have selected, it has material in the rubber paddles, so it'll go through and remove material, but it really kind of conforms to what you already have there. So you can kind of see there's a pretty shiny section versus not shiny. I'm going to go through and actually use my sanding stick here to try and get that more uniform. Might be one where I do need to get this back on the with the file itself, but we'll see what I can come up with real quick. So in fact, I'm going to go through and put it back in the vise. I'm going to be very careful because I'm pinching on this. If I wedged it too hard, it could go through and bend this section here. So I'm just going to tap it a little bit. Alright, now I've got it in the bit, and I'm actually going to turn on my light here with my lens, and so I can see better here. Yeah, and there's just as you can see, there's quite a bit of material that's different between the two shines. So I'm going to go back to the file and get this uniform. You can see here that the file is shining this section but not this. So when I was going through and carving, I did not realize that I was cutting down into this section. We do have a bit of material, so we could go through and clean this up uniform. I'm going to double check and make sure that we don't have any real issues. We're getting closer, so you can see here all this different shine, and then that in the center, it's got that slightly different glaze to it. We're almost uniform, so you really want to try and creep up on it. We could even at this point maybe switch to the sanding pads. Because you really want to be, the file removes quite a bit of material. So now you can see still that line right in the middle, right here.
and it's not a lot. Again, we're pretty close, so we'll just keep going slow. Come back up on it. Still have a little bit there in the center. Something else that's really cool to note is there is hammer drill attachments and things like that. If you've got peaks and valleys and you can't get them out, and or scratches that are a little bit worse than you want to, again, it's what you're trying to do with the material. Are you removing or are you burnishing?
To try and get it to where you want it. So
it's definitely, I'm sorry, this extra light might be messing with the camera, so my apologies.
And when you go through and you wanted to get a different section to sand with, you just twist it.
So now it's moved on to a new section.
Okay, now we're very, very close here. There is a slight blemish in the middle.
I still want to try and get that down with this grit sanding disc. Now, this is also something, it's got a spring retractable. Sometimes you gotta move the bit to one edge or the other. I think that it's gonna be something good that we can knock out here. Yeah, it's looking pretty good. So even with all of these pieces, you're looking for that little bit of perfection, right? And it's really cool how an artisan can, you know, take an imperfect thing and kind of give that look. Your eye really does tell you a lot of things, and your nail, if you go through your feel, you can feel most of the issues that you're running into while you're trying to get to that perfect shine. So okay, we're pretty close there. There's still kind of a little line or a blemish right there in the center, but we haven't, you know, this is just one grit, and I'd rather go through and hit that with the hammer drill, try and get that score out, then continue to remove material. The more uniform you can make it, the better off that you are. So there we are with the backing. We've got it really roughed in. I actually am going to, just for the moment, to get some quick work done, I'm going to hop over to my flex shaft and get some abrasives going. So we've got a 400 grit here. Very useful. It actually shines quite a bit. Gonna get this down here and get to work. It's pretty easy. It's not going through and removing a bunch off your fingers, so it's nice. I can hold it like this and kind of get a good sense of the peaks and the valleys and whatever small work still needs to be done. Kind of gives you a sense of what material still needs to be removed.
And you can tell that with the sheen or the difference in colors. So you'll have a shiny part, and those are the peaks, and the dull part that are the valleys. So your high points will get shined before the low points. Now, some of the things that ends up happening while you're going through this approach is the pieces heat up a little bit, which is okay. You just have to be mindful. You go through and you get a little too lax and you stay on a spot too long, then all of a sudden it's burning you as you hold the piece. Okay, so with that, now you should be able to go through and see, like I discussed, there's a little lip still there I don't like. There is some peaks and some valleys. There's actually what I like to call the fingerprint. Let me see if I can get it in here so you can see it. You're right there at the top of the piece. As you 3D print, it actually goes through and layer by layer, it has slightly different resolution. So if you can see that, layer by layer, it goes through in steps. So it ends up naturally, it has a specific resolution, and it leaves a little fingerprint or casting print. Now you can go through and sand those out before it becomes metal. It's a little bit easier on you because metal is much harder to work with, and that resin, it goes pretty quickly. But when you have a full sprue tree like this one, it's much easier just to go through and cast it all at once and then deal with each individual piece. So there's a lot to these. It's definitely something where, you know, you could be as thorough with it as you can. There's going to be some flaws and defects. Casting is very difficult. You have to go through each individual piece and make sure that the temperatures are right, the metals are clean and right, that you use the right type of, they call it investment. So the investment part of the casting. So also you see that everything on the inside of here is pretty dull still. No work's been done in there. What I do is I've got a 5mm burr, okay, which you can put into the piece or you could do it by hand, but should be able to snag one of these burrs, okay, and clean up the inside of here. It is cutting and removing material. It usually gives a pretty nice clean shine. And I'm gonna have to go up a size. That's slightly too big. That'll be a 5.5. Let's see here. I'll move on to a different set. So these are some of the very expensive portions of what we do. is the cutting burrs. Cutting burrs are very much expensive. And they go through and they show you, this is the 5 mil. This is the stone that we were going to go through and try our best to use. So 5 mil in this groove. I know I'm 5% over. You can see it's almost a 5.5. There's a little bit of play in there. So the next step that I got up is a 6, which is way too big. I think I've got a 5.5 actually in one of my other kits, but we'll go with the 5 right now. Kind of see what we can clean up. That's why these tolerances are so important. You know, you got to go through and make sure you got them just right, because when you don't, it tells you. So, like I said, I actually printed this off, and it was one of my first prints with this type of resin, castable resin, and I went through and determined, like, hey, let's see what I can do here. It says it's got shrinkage, and it was 4 or 5%, and I thought, well, 5%, we'll go through and do that, and it ended up being a bit more than I anticipated. So it's definitely gotten that a little bit bigger than I wanted. Some of the other things that you can go through and do in this situation is I have split shafts. So let me see if I could show you what I am talking about. So this is a split shaft. It has that slit in it. It's pretty small, and you can go through and add little cuts of sandpaper. So with this actually is small enough diameter, it can go down to most of the items in that point that you want to go through and clean. So let me see, I think that is actually going to do it. So it actually will be spinning and try to get all the way down in there. So let's switch our flex shaft. Now I gotta switch direction just because of the way that I know this flex shaft goes. Now you gotta be careful here too, because you're holding a very small piece and you're trying to get flex shaft down in there. Now that's done pretty quick work in there. Fairly clean. I can go a little bit smaller here. I got my finger here. You gotta be careful though, because you'll burn the crap out of yourself. Maybe just get it started. And there it is, nice and shiny. You want to have this as clean and shiny as you possibly can, because when your stone's in there, it acts as a mirror. It helps the shine. So, very, very important. Small piece, small details, and really, I don't know if you guys have seen me yet, but I've got these, this headlamp and my 6x magnification on, which very much helps me see a lot of this stuff. It might be hard to see on the camera. So, yeah, just bear that in mind. It's definitely something you want to see as much as you can, and little details matter, so. Now I've had some clients who actually like that fingerprint, and I've really like it. It's something unique that they can go through and say, like, hey, this is handmade by my friend, by Gregory Bishop. I like how he does things. I like the
you know, that aspect of it. So sometimes, you know, depending, I will go through and discuss with it at first. I have a few that are polished with the fingerprint still in there, and others that I've sanded it out. You know, it's all very much personal preference, what they feel is important to them. And I mean, jewelry you can buy anywhere. What makes jewelry, and it's really the journey, what matters to you, the heartfeltness of what you're getting. So it's, you know, what do you want? It's, you can do anything. You can order things from Amazon, way cheaper. But it also comes out of a factory that, you know, we don't know the conditions or how much that they actually went through and was done, or is it handcrafted fine jewelry. You know, it's whatever you want. So I think that this is something that's really important too, going through and knowing, hey, what is it that I want to have. Okay, so we're getting pretty darn close to actually throwing this in the tumbler, which the tumbler will go through and burnish a lot of the imperfections out. If we didn't sand to a real fine grit, it really is just a show of it's not going to polish it up real fine. It's got too much work to do, but it will go through and show you areas again that you'll need to work. So I do find this very important, that each piece is just a small, you know, you're working up to where you need to go for that perfection. You get hasty and you get in front of it, or you start removing too much material, you end up with a piece that looks very different than the others, and it's just not reached that level of perfection that you hope for. And this is that what we were wanting to be careful of. We are still okay. Uh-oh. All right, we'll go through and pause at this point. We're going to get this into the tumbler. We're going to use some stainless steel shot, which I've got here. Dump it in, get some soapy water, and let this go for about 20 minutes or so. Then you got to go for an adventure to find it again. Where's Waldo?